Oh gosh, Mike was a great guy. He was 6'2", about 230, and just loved life, very full of life. And we met at a JC conference. Had a lot in common because we both loved doing things for our community and serving other people. And we just met, fell in love, and got married about a year after that. After we got married in 1989, we were living in Virginia, and Mike was working for Virginia Farm Bureau Insurance Company, and I was working as the executive director of the Virginia PTA organization when I found out that we were expecting a baby. We had the baby, and 6 weeks later, Mike had a new job in Colorado. Everything was going great, new job, new life in Colorado, very exciting time in our life having that little new precious baby with us as well. Mike traveled a lot with his job, with training people, as I mentioned. He would go to 7 states in the region around Colorado, and he was asked to go to Chickasha, Oklahoma to do a training. Well, Mike's mom and granddad and grandma still lived in Boyd, Texas, which is in Wise County, just north of Fort Worth. And he was talking to his mom a couple of days before he was to go do that assignment in Oklahoma, and she said, "Well, your granddad is not doing very well. He's very ill. And could you perhaps fly to DFW, get my car, then drive to Oklahoma, and that way you could spend some time with us when you finished your training?" So he agreed to do that. Obviously, he wanted to see his granddad because of the nature of his illness. So I had lunch with my husband at the Denver airport when you could still do that back in 1991. Said, "Goodbye, I love you, I'll talk to you tonight." And I did talk to him that night. He got to DFW and got his mom's car and went to Boyd and visited with them. And then he left to drive to Chickasha, Oklahoma. And that's where he did his training on that Tuesday and Wednesday, and was to finish on Thursday, November 21st of 1991. I had talked to him each of those nights, but on that Thursday I didn't hear from him. And I really began to wonder, gosh, why didn't he call? He always called me. So I had tucked the baby into her bed, and I got in bed about 10:30 as I recall. And I picked up a book that was laying beside my bed, and I began to read. And it's very ironic that I was reading this particular book that night. This book is called When Bad Things Happen to Good People. So I was reading that book when the doorbell did ring. I peeked out the upstairs window. We were living in a 3-story townhouse, and it was snowing quite heavily that night in Denver. I peeked out that window, and I recognized that there was a green minivan on our driveway, and I knew exactly who that belonged to. And all I could think of is, what in the world are Cheryl and Greg doing at my house at almost 11 o'clock at night on a Thursday night? So I walked down the 2 flights of stairs to the bottom floor where the front door was. And I describe it as never forgetting every single step I took. I'll never forget what I had on, and I'll certainly never forget opening my front door, and there stood Cheryl and Greg, and our pastor was right behind them. And everyone knows when a minister, a rabbi, or a police officer is at your door late at night, it's not going to be good news. And I guess I instantly recognized that. And I wanted to do the only thing that seemed natural to me at the time, which was to slam the door in their face. But I couldn't do that, of course. I had to let them in. And that begins what I describe as the longest night of my life. Well, when I opened that door and saw them standing there, I'm sure I had a blank stare on my face. And my friend Cheryl, with no training in death notification, being a young mom just like me, had to look at me and say, "Laura, there's been a terrible accident and Mike has been killed." So they helped me understand that I had to call a lot of people, including Mike's boss, because he was on a business trip, Mike's other friends and family members that might not have known from his mother, because she was the one who had been notified first, because Mike was driving her vehicle. And of course, the Wise County Sheriff's Office contacted her first. And they had to help me understand that I had to go into our closet, pick out clothes to bury my 32-year young husband. I had to figure out how in the world I was going to get to Dallas-Fort Worth the next morning. We were a young married couple with very little money. I wasn't working except a few hours part-time, and I didn't know how I was going to do that. I fortunately had my friend Greg, Cheryl's husband, who said to me, "I'm going with you on that airplane." He realized quickly, I think, that I couldn't handle a baby all the paraphernalia that comes with her and getting myself there too. So he did graciously offer to go with me. We were able to get to the airport in Denver. Someone paid for my ticket. I still to this day do not know who, but I believe it was Mike's company because his boss was there. And Greg and I, my friend and I, and my baby got on that airplane to Dallas. And on that airplane was where I really discovered what I had become the night before. And what I had become was a single mom in an instant and a widow in an instant. Well, I was very curious what in the world had happened to Mike. How could that happen? I knew he had left Chickasha, I knew he was en route to Boyd, and I knew the way he should have gone. What we found out a few days later from the police report and from witnesses that were able to give statements was that Mike left Chickasha in the afternoon, but instead of driving straight to Boyd, he drove into downtown Fort Worth and he went to eat at his favorite Mexican restaurant, which is Joe T. Garcia's. So he went to Joe T. Garcia's. He left there around 7 p.m. He had 0 alcohol in his system. And he was driving his mom's 4-door large Crown Victoria headed northbound on Highway 287 just out of Fort Worth. That is a 4-lane divided highway with a large grassy median between the northbound and southbound lanes. It was already dark at 7 o'clock that time of year, and evidently he was going 58 in a posted 55-mile-an-hour speed zone. He was driving on the inside lane, probably listening to the radio. He topped the overpass at Blue Mound Road, and at the same time he topped that overpass, a drunk driver driving a 4-door Cadillac, another very large vehicle, heavy vehicle, topped it, headed south in Mike's northbound lane, and he was going 83 miles an hour. So the combined speed of 135 miles an hour head-on is not survivable generally. Even though Mike had on his seatbelt, which I remind everyone is the best defense against a drunk driver, in this case it could not save his life. The drunk driver was so drunk that he didn't have his seatbelt on, and he died as well at the scene. What we later found out is how drunk that drunk driver was. He was driving at a 0.34 blood alcohol concentration, which at that time was 3 times the legal limit. It would now be 4 times the legal limit.